and welcome to the Frontline Club. Thank you very much for coming tonight to this photography networking party. We're going to have a short discussion to kick off the evening, and that will be followed by a presentation of photographs from some of the photographers who are in the room. There are about 160 slides, so plenty to entertain you in the background. But to kick us off with the discussion, we've got a panel here of respected people in the photography industry. Moderating the event tonight, we've got Alexia Singh, who's the editor in charge of the wider image desk at Thomson Reuters, and she'll introduce everyone else. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Flora. Thanks. Welcome everyone to tonight's panel discussion, which is on the topic of crediting. We've got 4 experts here who are going to discuss some of the issues around this subject. It's going to be a fairly short debate, about 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up and give you all the opportunity to ask our experts some questions. So first of all, I'll introduce my panelists. We've got Aidan Sullivan here, Vice President of Assignments for Getty Images, UK and USA. We've got Steve Macleod here, who is the Creative Director of Metro Imaging and also a professional photographer and curator. Here we've got Juliette Atkinson from Demotix, who's the sales manager there, and David Hoffman, an independent photographer for 30 years, and also founder of EP UK and Photo Forum. Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to kick it off with a question for David. David, as I mentioned, you've been independent for 30 years. So perhaps you're in a good place to tell us, is there a problem in getting your work credited? What, if anything, can you do about it? And why is it so important for a photographer to see that byline with their work?
Well, to start with your last point, it's not important for the photographer to see the byline. It's important for everybody else to see the byline. Things have been getting worse in credit terms, certainly over the last 30 years, a lot. It used to be unusual for me not to get a byline in a paper with one of my pictures, and mostly I would actually call them up and they'd apologise. Now it's very rare to see a byline at all. The law, the Copyright Designs and Patents Act, gives you a moral right to have your credit used, but not in magazines or newspapers. And that's an enormous omission. About half my business in the last century came from researchers who got newspaper cuttings and would then see a picture, see my name, give me a call. All that income has vanished now. It's gone. And of course the same researchers now go to the web and they go to the big agencies first and Getty get my dinner.
And you're a contributor, right?
Not a contributor, I'm a member. You haven't actually got any pictures. And that's another
interesting
debate.
arrangement.
One of the problems is that on the web, almost every use of a picture strips out the credit that's in the metadata. Google are probably the biggest offenders, but they're followed closely by BBC and pretty much by all the other big users. The metadata should carry, and usually does when the photographer sends the picture out, should carry the name. That's stripped out automatically by Google. Google are the biggest makers of orphan works in the world. They are generating orphan works millions and millions a minute, and I'm not exaggerating, those are really the numbers. Google are also, of course, the biggest movers behind forces to try and change the law to allow any picture without a credit to be treated as if it was an orphan work. In other words, a work with no owner. And therefore, Google are trying to actually set things up so that if a picture doesn't have a name on it, it's free for anyone to pretty much use for a nominal fee. And at the same time, Google are ripping the names out of the pictures. It's like having no law saying you can't remove number plates, but having a law saying if you see a car without a number plate, sure, you can help yourself. That's the problem.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing, there's almost no way legally of enforcing the moral right that you have to a credit.
Yeah, well, Aidan, you were saying earlier about orphan works and how, without going too deeply into the subject, but it's probably worth
It is very worrying,
mentioning.
and I agree absolutely. The orphan works issue is scary. I mean, you know, if somebody picks up an image, copies that, puts it on a blog, somebody sees that blog, picks up that picture, puts it on another blog, suddenly nobody knows who that belongs to. There's no credit, nobody knows whose picture it is, and that is a scary thing. So that's not something I want to see happening. I mean, I think it's really hurting the industry. Absolutely, makes it very, very difficult for agencies to enforce sales, which of course we do as Getty Images. We have our own methods of tracking unlicensed usage through a company called PicScout, which is Israeli software, which we use all the time to find unlicensed imaging, which kind of moves away from crediting. And in some ways, we were trying to work out what is the most important thing, what needs to be credited first. And for me, it's always been the photographer, because it's the artist who needs to be credited. It's an annoyance that if you see an image and the artist is credited and then the agency isn't credited, you don't know who is licensing that image on behalf of that photographer. Perhaps there isn't anybody, but it would be nice to have that information. But most of the credits that we agree with our clients, we do through relationship. A lot of the photographers that I work with are being assigned by magazines anyway. So by the very nature of that assignment, they have asked for that photographer. So it'd be highly unlikely that they weren't going to credit them. And we have those discussions. Things slip through the cracks, for sure. And I might call them up and say we were very disappointed to see that either use the wrong credit or no credit. And we will have those conversations. But I think, it is the photographer that's the most important thing. And we were just joking, and here I am years through my career, and I recently took a photograph of Don McCullum and Eugene Riches together for an interview with PDN. And I was so excited to see the magazine come out, to see if I got a credit. I mean, 40 years on. And I did, and I was so excited. It was like, oh, look, that's my name. Anyway, so I think it is still incredibly important for an artist to see their name, and I think it's their right to do so.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's interesting, if I can sort of interject there, on the use of the web. I mean, there's one thing happened to me today. We were looking on YouTube when we were supposed to be more gainfully employed at work, and we found some online musicians who were uploading their compositions and things onto YouTube to get airtime and get seen and get noticed and things like that. But there's one artist in particular, and all the imagery that he was using was by one photography artist. Very sort of ethereal, sort of aurora borealis, huge landscapes of it by this photographer. None of it credited to the photographer. And we'd contacted the author of the musical pieces, and they're just lifted straight off the guy's website. And there's no permissions, there's no dialogue, there's nothing going below. And then these things are using they go on like, somebody else has been publishing that, republishing it. So there's no breadcrumb trail to the origination of these works, and they're being used in a purpose which is sort of out of sync or out of context with the original work. I was also on a plane the other day. I was flying back, and I was reading The Economist, and not one illustration, not one image in The Economist was captioned to any author. It's just a sort of blanket
That's a policy, then.
Policy
Yes. Yeah.
by publications, like The Economist, to sort of not credit anyone. And I think that's it's a real travesty, really.
I think it's wrong for us to mention that publication.
It's probably
just because of that.
but it's my opinion. It's something where I think it's very difficult. It's challenging sort of times for people.
Juliette, you work for Demotix, who has many contributors who, as well as being professional photographers, are, can we say, non-professional photographers. Is it the same for them, the need, the desire to see their name printed, their byline printed?
Absolutely.
And what challenges do you have within your agency in trying to establish this kind of this crediting?
Well, it's very important. Our agency's made up of thousands of photographers all from all around the world. A lot of them are professional photojournalists. There's some semi-professionals and there's some amateurs. For all of them, it's very important to see their name and their credit. In fact, for the amateurs, it's much more important.
I think your mic is a little low.
It's more important for a lot of our photographers, particularly the amateurs, to see, and the semi-professionals to see their credit than it is to get the money, to get a decent fee of any kind. Demotix is all about the community, all about the network, and there's every story on our website, the photographer's name and their avatar is clearly displayed. and there's no excuse whether the publications coming to our website to download from our site, or if they've got an FTP feed.
Yeah.
And all the credit information is in the IPTC data, as you were saying. It's all there in the metadata, and they need to pick up on it a lot more. I think part of the problem is that reporters are sometimes responsible for just taking a picture and not the picture desks. So online particularly, you have online reporters just writing articles. They need an image to illustrate their article, and they just grab it from their pool, and it's not their problem to work out.
Do you think you have a greater challenge than, say, Aidan or more established agencies in pushing this?
I think as a young agency, we have less. It's more difficult to put pressure on some of the big newspapers to credit us. So one of the largest, how do I say this without naming them? The largest, the most read online site with 77 million unique hits a month globally, never credit us. And that's a problem, but you know, our options.
You ask.
Who is it?
Come on, who is it?
It's the second largest newspaper in this country, and it's the most read globally, with 77 million hits a month.
Didn't it close recently?
No.
Blame it on them.
Different group, I think.
Yeah. But then there's some publications like The Guardian who are fantastic, and they've always credited our photographer and the agency. Always. They've never not done either one of those. Some online sites might just do the agency or just the photographer, and that's better than nothing. But I don't think there's any excuse really for.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to, you know, back in the day at the Sunday Times, you know, you would buy an exclusive set of pictures, portraits that were done, and the agency would have quite writ large, triple fees apply. If you do not credit this picture properly, triple fees apply, and you sign an agreement to that effect. So if you get the credit wrong, it goes from £1,000 to £3,000. So you kind of, you know, learn quickly that you put the credit in. But that's not easy to do when there's a lot of material around. Those were exclusive portraits that, you know, we were all vying for and bidding for. Whereas, you know, when, as David was saying, there's so much online now that that exclusivity, it's hard to enforce that rule now.
Yeah, absolutely. With the huge amount of options that the picture editors have, it's very hard for even the largest agencies, down to an independent, to a young agency like yourself, to have any recourse or power to fall back on.
I mean, our only option, I think, is to either cut the FTP feed to some newspapers, but as a young agency, it's not really viable. We can't do that.
Yes, I was going to say that Aidan touched upon the fact in the old days, back in the previous century, you would have a contractual term saying plus 50%, plus 300%, whatever it was, and you could enforce that. That really isn't viable these days, and I think particularly any individual photographer who tried to put such terms on a newspaper or a magazine would just lose their work. It just can't be done.
No, indeed. But there are relationships that can help with
yes,
that.
a bit. But people move on, and relationships are pretty flimsy these days. In fact, all my relationships with picture desks are very flimsy these days. In fact, they're almost invisible. And the other thing is, in law, the value of a credit. If you're going to sue someone for not giving you a credit, what is the value? How much have you lost if someone misses your byline off? How can you put a value on it? It's almost impossible to take it through the courts. And I think now, actually, the sort of...
Particularly if they've paid
Yes,
you.
they've paid the repro fee, exactly. And now, in fact, if someone argued back over your triple fees condition in the contract, the courts might well strike it out as an unfair term, and saying it's a penalty clause in disguise. So I think we've lost it. We really need new laws, new legislation. And it's something that the Gowers report just completely didn't think about. Hargreaves has completely ignored it in the latest report. There was no provision in the Digital Economy Bill last year to enforce the right to a credit. There's no sign that anyone except photographers is taking this seriously.
And I think another side of that is that there are photographers that don't actually care whether they get their credit, and that
Yes.
creates an issue in itself. If the value is no longer there,
Yeah.
if you are creating imagery purely to put into a stock library and just see the money roll, and really want your
Good timing.
there's the money roll. There you are. You can hear it. But also, there are circumstances where we ask for a photographer not to be
Yes, of
credited
course.
for
We have
various
circumstances where photographers have worked in a commission where they specifically have said my name's not on it.
Yeah.
For various reasons, and it's not always a negative response to the type of commission that they're undertaking. It's just not to be deemed the type of work that they want to get known for. So there's sort of
security issues.
the security issues, or they're policing their the content that's released.
But these are very rare instances, and they are allowed for. You have a moral right also not to be attributed. I mean, you have control of attribution in law, in theory. But I mean, another thing is the bit that Juliette just touched on, with many of her contributors being really amateurs. I mean, they're people who don't make a living through photography. They just want to see their pictures out there, and if the cost of that is giving up on a byline, they're willing to do that.
Sure.
And that, of course, weakens everybody else's case too.
Just before we go to questions, Steve has got an interesting point around this topic that opens it up a little bit, which is... Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
It's something about credit and relationships with, coming from a production background where, I suppose back in predominantly analog days, there was a reliance on a photographer with say a printer or something like that, where we found there was a very sort of small group of people where, you'd work very much one-on-one. But we found in production there was quite a heavy reliance on several individuals in putting a body of work together, technicians and people involved in software and file formatting and production and things like that. And there's a lot that goes on in the back end, to the point where I will work with a photographer where they'll be sending files from wherever they are in the world, and they say, you edit the story. You edit the story, you format the files, you do everything like that, and then you send it out there. And it's then, this is a tribute, who do you attribute that body of work to? Obviously the photographer first and foremost, but it's become more of a collaborative effect to what we're doing in production that often goes unseen. And the only thing I would say is that you don't have to attribute all these people and credit them where credit's due, but often there's very valuable relationships that can be built upon and forged by working with people at the back end in post-production, and whether that's a picture editor or somebody in that sort of area, then these things are sort of valuable. So it's not always a sort of a negative spin on people getting credit and getting their name onto something. It's about building relationships and you're all working together on something. But a lot of these people do go uncredited and unseen, and there's an important aspect of what you guys do as photographers.
Okay. We can throw this open now to questions. We've probably got another, how long have we got? Another 10 minutes? Okay. Take the opportunity, if you'd like, to speak to any of our experts.
Hi, I thought I saw, maybe it was Google had a new feature where you could paste a JPEG into a field and it would search for unlawful use. I don't know if it was Google, but there is some service or software out there where you upload a JPEG and it performs a search.
Yeah, tineye.com does that. Right. And there is a new Google image search, which I've tried. It doesn't seem to work very well, but no doubt it will get...
If you use low res, it's very good.
Is it? Okay.
Don't upload it.
Yeah. But TinEye is one I use quite often, and you can check. The problem is that TinEye is only really archived about 0.001% of the web. So if you're lucky, you'll hit it. But Aidan's bunch, PicScout, are really the leaders in this, I think.
They are amazing.
So maybe you can add something.
Well, basically the technology, crawls the web, and will find unlicensed imagery. Simple as that. It finds them. They tell us about it.
But Getty have bought it now, haven't they? So
yes.
it's only your toy.
No, not at all.
No,
it's ongoing business. Anybody can access PicScout.
Oh, hi. Just on the question of collaboration that you brought up, Steve, where do people stand on... I mean, when I started last century in photography, You know, the point where you started for the credit was the person who pushed the button. Even to the extent that there were some fashion photographers whose assistant were pushing the button, and it was a kind of grey area. Everything was set up, and the photographer assumed almost the role of the art director and said, okay, and shoot now, and shoot now, etc. On that collaboration, where would you stand on photographers who are working in collaborations like that, but quite often it will come out in an interview, well, I directed this, but somebody else pushed the button. I mean, there was a picture this week from the V&A South African exhibition.
It's an interesting topic because I do work with, not so much I would say commercial photographers, but artists who use photography as a form of expression. And there are several individuals that I work with who are very successful, but they don't take the photographs. They have an idea, and it's almost like the concept is their art form. They then employ somebody else. I was trying to get one of these people along tonight, the guy who actually goes and takes the photographs. The artist isn't even on location, he's not with him. He just has an idea and he sends them out there. The guy, in this case, who goes out and takes the photographs and does all the production work and works in post-production with myself, is actually a men's fashion photographer. He works in men's fashion and beauty and that sort of thing. But the type of work he works with and is employed for by this artist is it's the sublime. It's the sort of white cube of, you know, it's that sort of type of work.
Well, that can be taken to a whole kind of art level.
Yeah,
Gregory
different level. Yeah,
Jeff
they're all do it.
Koons
You know,
it's like not touching the art.
This guy, and you know, is you know, this is what they do. It's having the idea, the concept. But it is a very grey area. You know, who's composing? You know, if that artist isn't even there on the location, isn't even composing the work, but he has that idea, and it's a very tight brief. It's not like just go out and photograph this. There's a very, very tight brief that they have to run to. They come back, and a lot of time we're editing the work, and that's fine. That's what I'm paid for. That's the service we provide. But I'm not saying, oh, that's unfair. That's what we do.
Steve, would the artist be happy choosing any photographer, or is the artist specifically chosen that photographer?
No, they generally work very specifically
with that photographer,
with an individual. I know fashion photographers who have several assistants, and the fashion photographer isn't even on the shoot.
Yeah.
But they get the credit, and it's always credited to them.
But if they want a particular photographer, then clearly the photographer has a large creative input.
Yeah. There's also a very strong dialogue between that artist and that photographer. You generally find there's a very strong bond about what about, you know, whether it's metaphorical or whatever the concept. They sort of get it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not a sort of I'm paying you to go and do this.
That's been a kind of industry norm for lighting.
Yeah.
You know, assistants who you employ because they are brilliant at lighting. And
I'm employed to light people's sets.
There you go.
You know, I don't see I should. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to go and do that and be involved and get paid for it, but I don't necessarily feel that I need to be credited for it. I think it might be different in multimedia. We were touching this.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how with multimedia, because
Flora was saying about, you know, sorry, Alexia.
Just because I think in multimedia there's very clear defined roles. There's somebody who does the sound, there's someone who does the post-production, and it's a genuinely collaborative process where each element is as important as the other. Then I think it becomes quite natural to acknowledge each person who was involved in the process. I think that, as you were saying, when there's a photographer who's very prominent, for him to then start to break it down and acknowledge different people is almost breaking some barrier, I would imagine.
Well, you're buying a brand name, aren't you? If you're employing a very well-known photographer, you know, whoever it may be, Testino, LaChapelle, you know, there's a whole team that comes with that, but you're paying for that name. And I think, you know, like a movie, you're going to have credits rolling for 20 minutes if you bother to stay in the cinema. And everybody made the tea to you know.
Imagine length of the byline.
But actually, online you can do that, of course, because it can just be on a separate page, or it can be on a separate, you know, tab, or so there's much more, you know, scope to do it online now.
Anybody else?
Hello, Junaid, freelance producer. You mentioned, hello, I'm here. You mentioned there's no contract for photojournalists to enforce fees and policies. So how do photo journalists benefit the pictures they submit to agencies?
I don't think I said there was no contract.
No law.
No written contract, you said. No written contract for them to sign when they distributing their pictures?
Well, what I'm saying is that it's impossible to impose the sort of contract that would demand increased fees for no credit on publishers as an individual. And of course agencies ask their contributors, I think this is true of all agencies, to waive their moral rights, because the agency can never guarantee that there'll not be a credit, that the picture won't be cropped, that the moral rights won't be transgressed in some way. So I think every agency demands that when you sign up to them, you waive your moral rights. But of course anybody can impose can ask to have any contract imposed. It's just that in the current climate, the photographer has no clout at all.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, I'm a Brazilian photographer, and this reality in Brazil is quite different of here, because in Brazil you hardly see a picture without the credit. I've seen, like in the newspaper where I used to work, I've seen like my editor not publishing a picture because he couldn't find the credit who did it. There is a problem we face there. It's quite different. It's about like the copyright, because most of the newspapers, when you are a freelancer or whatever, they ask you to sign a contract where you give them the copyright of your pictures. They pay you the amount of money which is fair to publish that story, but then they keep that image in their archives and they keep selling it, and you have no rights on that anymore. How is it here in England? How does it work here?
You need an agent.
Funnily enough.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of magazines and publishers in the UK that try and get away with that and succeed often. There was a discussion on EP UK a couple of days ago about Future Publishing, who had sent out a contract on a commission. In fact, somebody had put their own idea to the magazine, and the response of the magazine was, yes, fine, this is the fee for the story, and we'll keep all the copyright, won't we? Thank you. So they will try that on, and of course the more people who accept it, the harder it becomes for everybody else to resist it.
And the bigger the magazine, the more likely they'll Condé Nast. Anyone heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you can license your image to the publication on whatever the terms might be for that usage, and then 6 months later the picture might pop up as a little thumbnail, and you might not have even thought to negotiate, right, there's an embargo up to this period, and afterwards you remove from the archive if you want to reuse it. It's these things that actually, as Aidan says, an agency is probably
That's what you pay an agency to do for you.
That's certainly what we do. Is that every time it's reproduced, we get a new payment for it. If it's online, you've got a week's rights to use it online, and then it's off again. So they use it again. So it's paid for every single time it's used.
I mean, you can negotiate a buyout, and some photographers are very happy with that as long as the fee is high. And we would negotiate a fee that reflected the fact that it was a buyout.
Yeah, but usually like this contract, it's not even written by the editors or wherever. It's written by lawyers.
Yeah.
And every time I try to renegotiate with the editor, he was like, "Yeah, man, you're right. Let's change it." But they don't even know it. They don't even know. Like they say, "Oh, you have to sign it." But okay, but here you are saying that you have the copyright of my picture, and then they were like rereading. "Oh, you're right, man. Come on, I'm your side." And I managed to change it like in many newspapers, but some of them some big ones they don't.
Yeah. It's a game of whack-a-mole. You get one, you knock it on the head, and there's two more spring up.
Okay. I know, Aidan, that you were giving your personal view, but I can't remember the last time I saw a Getty image which had the photographer credited as well. Your employers seem to be much keener on having the agency credited than the photographer. David, I think, has so far given us much more real-world experience than most of the others. I think that one of the big problems in getting a credit is the fact that the photographer is now much further removed from the picture editor than ever before. We used to have a personal relationship with all the picture editors, with Aidan, for example. Now we're sometimes 2, 3, 4 removed because of sub agencies and agreements between agencies, and it's no longer possible to have that personal relationship.
I mean, from my perspective, I don't think there was actually a question there, but you know, the photographers I work with, I had 5 publications this morning with bylines as big as the headline. So I'm just lucky that exactly. I'm talking about assignment work, or actually features that we're selling. But you know, what I do with Getty Images, the department that I run, you know, we're working with photojournalists who are on assignment. They're very high-end, you know, photojournalists. We can argue that we need those credits, and more often than not, we will get them. But I do take your point that, you know, ours is a very big agency. We represent many thousands of photographers, and I suspect you're right. There is a distance that grows as the business becomes bigger and bigger.
Got time for one last question. Oh, well, then you can all go and get free drinks.
Thank you.
Thank you.